Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss The Replacements, starring Keanu Reeves, Gene Hackman, Orlando Jones, Jon Favreau, Brooke Langton, Rhys Ifans, Jack Warden, and Faison Love, directed by Howard Deutsch. Now, I have seen this movie before back in the theaters when it came out like 25 years ago, and I remember having a blast with it, but is it as good as I remembered? Let's get into the movie. A retired football player named Shane Falco, played by Keanu Reeves, lives in a houseboat where he scrapes off some plankton in the ocean, and he finds his football trophy in the water and takes the football off of it and pretends to play a little football himself as he played in the Sugar Bowl back in 1996 and had a bad game with while Eddie Martell plays a terrible game in the football pro team called the Washington Sentinels. And I believe it's Washington, D.C., and Eddie gets fired by Edward O'Neill and hires a new coach, aka his old friend named Jimmy McGinty, played by Gene Hackman, as he accepts and gets some replacement players with no interference as they have 4 games left and has to win 3 games in order to get in the playoffs. And who does Jimmy hire? A bunch of non-pro football players like Danny Bateman, played by Jon Favreau, Clifford Franklin, played by Orlando Jones, whom can't catch a robbery with a Twinkie, brothers Andre and Jamal Jackson, Nigel Gruff, played by Rhys Ifans, who owes money to the mobsters, and others along with Shane Falco, who hasn't played football in years, as Shane is approached by Jimmy to ask Shane to be his quarterback. As he doesn't accept it at first, but eventually he'll get to the football field, and I have fun with all the characters, every single one of them, as I'm entertained by this movie from start to finish. The original players, led by Eddie, throw eggs at the replacement players, as the replacements get to practicing as Brian Murphy, who can catch a football, is deaf, and meets Jimmy and other coaches like Leo and Earl Wilkinson, getting unchained from prison, and we also meet sumo wrestler Fumiko, who's the most powerful pusher in the sport. Meanwhile, Shane arrives at the stadium, and the former players push Shane in his truck around and comes back to the stadium, and Shane throws the football to the catcher in a quarter mile and bumps into another player, which was really funny as that cracks me up. Danny goes after Shane as he wears the red, and Danny gets at him like a bull, as he brings up in dialogue. And people know Shane as from the Sugar Bowl disaster he went through years ago in 1996. As Shane stares at Annabelle Farrell, played by Brooke Langton, as she's head cheerleader, while Danny bumps into Shane again as he forgot about the red shirt rule, while Annabelle tests some cheerleaders, and some of them are pretty bad at it, while Jamal and Fumiko have an argument about the difference between Chinese and Japanese, which are 2 different countries, to be fair, while they sit around to have lunch with each other and get to know each other as Annabelle meets Heather and Dawn and makes them join the cheerleader club as Shane sees his car vandalized by Eddie renting something called Scab. SCAB is, I think, is how it's spelled, and his team as Annabelle gives Shane a ride home as she's driving freaking crazy, and she does get him home without any accidents whatsoever, which is amazing to me. And their chemistry is good to watch as she doesn't date football players, not even a quarterback. And I like these two as lovers, and they work great together in my opinion. Shane watches the game in an empty stadium when Jimmy comes in and Shane asks why him, as he believes in him, and next day comes as the game is about to begin, and Jimmy gives a speech about playing professional football, and as they get introduced, Danny accidentally jumps on one of the cheerleaders, and the game begins with the Sentinels catching the ball, and Fumiko and Jamal get into another argument as Shane gets hit and gets back home and go over the play and take more time than usual at a football game, huddling up, and they play the game as Shane gets knocked down by the other team, and they get the ball, and Danny goes after their quarterback, and the other team scores a touchdown, and I'm enjoying myself with the football game scenes, as I'm having a pretty damn good time with this movie. Fumiko vomits, as does Clifford, while in a huddle up, and they pick up their feet and talk over the play while looking kind of funny. And the play begins, and Nigel kicks the ball rather in a good distance while Danny beats up on Nigel, which was kind of amusing, despite that's not what the game of football is all about. And Shane gets smacked into the ground while Jimmy asks Danny to get him the ball. Yeah, Jimmy. And he got him the ball, which was also a very funny scene as Clifford was wide open, but the Shane gets too scared and passes it to Clifford as they unfortunately lose the game. And Jimmy is upset about it and takes it out on Shane while Annabelle looks at Shane like, is he all right? And they celebrate the loss by getting a drink and playing I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor until Eddie and his teammates come in acting like a-holes. And they get in the bar fight, that was started by Eddie, and the replacement players go to jail anyways. Then editing is tight for me, as I was following every minute, as this is a breezy 2-hour movie. While in jail, Clifford starts singing I Will Survive, which is a song I really love, and was exposed by an alien singing it when I was a young kid back in the 90s. And I really like the way these guys dance together, as that was a great scene until Jimmy comes in and bails them out by saying, I would have loved to have been there to see Martel get his ass kicked. And also says if that happens again, there won't be a place on the football field for any of them. And next day comes, and Annabelle visits Shane and puts on some lotion on Shane as she realizes he cares for his teammates. Wage offers him to come to her work at a bar one day, and she'll buy him a beer. And Eddie sees Shane park in another teammate's parking spot and pushes his car over until Jamal and Andre come in and shoots Eddie's car and teaches them some respect by putting Shane's truck back, and it's back on its wheels. And that was a kick-ass scene, and as I'm having a good kick-ass time with this movie at this point, Jimmy gives the team a pep talk to the team about their fears, as that was a laugh-out-loud funny scene, and the acting was a lot of fun as Shane talks about quicksand, while others have insects and spiders and bees, and Jimmy tells them to lose that fear on Sunday's game. And when they get there, as Shane gets an idea to let them through, and so he can knock one player from San Diego out with the football as they score a touchdown. Meanwhile, the cheerleaders dance rather erotically. And are they at a strip club? As that's where they come from, the players. And the kids get distracted by their cheerleaders. And this scene was so inappropriate, and the San Diego coach gets upset as the Sentinels score again. And Shane goes over the line that eventually wins the game to Nigel kicking the ball to the goal as Danny chases after Nigel. And this scene was awesome, as it was absolutely freaking humorous. Shane comes to the bar Annabelle works at as she closes the bar for the night, and he learns about Annabelle's father and about how she grew up and with football stories. And they start to fall in love with each other as they start smooching. And we move on to the recap of how the game was played. And we continue the game, and Clifford misses the touchdown, and Jimmy gets the idea of supergluing his hands so he can catch the ball, and it can get stuck in his hands. And they run the same play as before, but this time Clifford scores the touchdown, and they win the game. And I'm still having fun with it, as I'm having a pretty good time. The news interviews Shane at first, but he gives it to Clifford until Danny pushes him to the side, and we move on to Jimmy and O'Neal, talking about how Eddie crossed the line to play as quarterback, and Jimmy is against it and has to tell Shane the bad news, but Shane takes it rather well because O'Neal believes Shane will wuss out the same way he did on the Sugar Bowl back in 1996, which was said earlier in the film. That's why I brought it up a couple times. And he gets to the locker room, and Eddie tells Shane in a sarcastic way how sorry he is. And I believe it was sarcastic, which is why I said it while Shane has a date with Annabelle, while he goes to a bar, and Shane comes in and tells everyone about the bad news about how Eddie crossed the line and he'll become the quarterback for the last game and misses out on his date with Annabelle. And kudos to actor Brett Cullen, whom I reviewed in Ghost Rider as Johnny Blaze's father. He was also in The Dark Knight Rises and Joker, a couple of Batman films, but anyways, for playing a douche of a character, as he pulls it off well, in my opinion. The last game against Dallas begins with Eddie being not so welcome back by the audience. Well, the cheerleaders dance and cheer at the same time, while Eddie doesn't play the game well, while Clifford gets bumped into and stepped on by a Dallas player. And Dallas scores touchdowns, and Eddie makes a bunch of terrible moves while Shane watches from his houseboat and sees the team is not playing very well and sees how the guys are playing with Eddie, and Eddie disrespects Jimmy as a coach, and Shane turns off the TV and comes by the stadium during the halftime and gets there during the halftime and sees the team doesn't like Eddie. And when Shane arrives and asks Jimmy if he could play, and he believes he can, Jimmy, I mean, get towards Shane, as they throw out Eddie, and Shane comes out to play the game of football, and people cheer for Shane as he can save the game, and he kisses Annabelle, and the first half is intense until we get to Shane coming in to save the day, and I really like this movie's spirit. The second half begins as Dallas is getting their asses kicked, while the referee can't do much as he makes the calls, he cannot make the calls, which was hilarious. And the game continues while one of the players who believes in God scores a touchdown while getting his leg broken, and they continue the game and they call off a play with passing the ball to Wilkinson, and Eddie will stand by him when he goes back to prison. And Shane makes a speech to play the final piece of the game, while Clifford's scoring a touchdown, and at one point Nigel sees the men who are going to kill him for wasting their time and money, and Nigel is afraid for his life and almost does a field kick, but Shane takes the ball away from him and scores a touchdown, and the referee calls a bad call, and Nigel breaks his arm, and one more time before the season is over, and Shane gets the ball, and like he and Brian, the deaf player, and Shane throws the ball, and Brian catches the ball and wins the game as everybody cheers as he does his teammates and the cheerleaders as Shane kisses Annabelle, and the team celebrates by dancing the song I Will Survive, and Jimmy cheers them on by dancing while narrating about a replacement player. And the climax was great, as I felt this is an underrated movie that critics hated on, but I thought it was fun. But how fun was this movie? Let's talk about it in a rating. I'll give this movie a 7.5 out of 10. I really liked the characters as they were entertaining me from start to finish, and as I had a pretty damn good time with this movie, and I liked the chemistry between each character, even Shane and Annabelle, as they work with each other in a great way, as this movie is sometimes funny in a ha-ha kind of way. This is a breezy 2-hour movie, as every minute of it felt like very quickly, while the editing was tight the entire movie, and I really like a lot of the scenes, as the jail dance scene was a great scene, while there were some kick-ass moments, and the acting is just a lot of fun. This was a great time at the movies, as that was a great fun movie and funny football movie, as it felt completely clever. And this is a recommendation, as this movie still works as a football movie, and at the end of the day, it might not be the best football movie, but it's a pretty damn entertaining movie from start to finish, as this feels like an underrated film, and I like it better than the critics do, as this is a guilty pleasure for me. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for this review, and until then, I will survive!